The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, and Marcus Chun didn't even need to open it to know what it said. He'd watched Patricia Hendricks, the HOA president, personally slide it into his mailbox 3 hours earlier, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the metal with obvious satisfaction. 4 months. 4 months since he moved his 32-foot sailboat, the Serenity, to the private dock behind his waterfront home in Pelican Bay. 4 months of Patricia's increasingly aggressive complaints about unsightly vessels and property value concerns. What? Patricia didn't know what. She'd never bothered to research before waging her campaign was that Marcus wasn't just another homeowner who bought waterfront property. He was a maritime attorney who'd spent 15 years specializing in coastal property rights. And 3 months ago, after Patricia's first threatening letter, Marcus had quietly begun documenting everything. Every letter, every conversation, every HOA meeting where Patricia had twisted the rules. Because today, when he opened that envelope, everything was about to change. Where are you from? Tell us in the comments below. And if you're loving this story of justice served, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of karma and revenge. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's see exactly how this unfolded. This is a story in 3 parts. The violation that pushed a reasonable man to his limits. The confrontation where decades of legal expertise met entitled ignorance. And the resolution where justice was served through the very rules Patricia thought she controlled. Marcus Chun had spent his entire adult life building a career around maritime law. After his wife died 2 years ago, he'd sold their inland home and bought this waterfront property specifically for the peace of being near the water, the same water where he and Sarah had spent countless weekends sailing together. The Serenity wasn't just a boat. It was the last piece of their shared dreams, lovingly restored over 7 years. When Patricia began her campaign to force him out, claiming his boat violated HOA regulations, Marcus tried everything the right way. He attended meetings, provided documentation, and requested copies of the actual bylaws. But Patricia stonewalled him at every turn, wielding her position like a weapon while other board members watched in uncomfortable silence. The breaking point came when Patricia threatened to have his boat towed and filed a lien against his property, all without showing him the specific rule he'd supposedly violated. That's when Marcus stopped asking and started digging. What Patricia didn't realize during her months of harassment was that Marcus had been building an airtight case. He discovered that the private channel behind the homes wasn't actually HOA property at all. It was a federally regulated waterway where Marcus himself held the commercial navigation permit through his law firm. He found irregularities in Patricia's own property that violated actual HOA rules she'd ignored. And most importantly, he documented every single overreach of her authority, every fabricated rule, every threat that crossed legal boundaries. When the confrontation finally came, Patricia would learn exactly what happens when you threaten someone who knows maritime law better than she knows her own bylaws. Marcus Chun, 47 years old, had practiced maritime and coastal property law for 23 years with the firm Brennan and Associates in Charleston, South Carolina. After his wife Sarah lost her battle with cancer 2 years earlier, he'd sold their century-old home downtown and purchased a waterfront property in Pelican Bay, a planned community of 80 homes along a private channel that fed into the Ashley River. The 3-bedroom house with its private dock had been Sarah's dream. She'd circled the listing in a magazine 6 months before her diagnosis, writing someday in the margin. Marcus made it his mission to honor that dream, even if she'd never see it. The Serenity, their 32-foot Columbia sailboat, came with him. He'd spent 7 years restoring her piece by piece in the marina, and she represented every weekend he and Sarah had stolen from their busy lives to be on the water together. The first incident happened 3 weeks after he moved in. Marcus returned from his law office on a warm September evening to find a printed notice taped to his front door. Attention! Boat storage at private docks requires HOA approval. Please submit request form to board within 14 days. No signature, no specific rule cited, just a generic directive. Marcus had reviewed the HOA bylaws before purchasing all 67 pages and remembered no such restriction. Still, wanting to be a good neighbor, he emailed the HOA board requesting the approval form and asking which specific bylaw the notice referenced. He received no response. 5 weeks later, the second letter arrived, this time in his mailbox. Second notice: your vessel remains in violation of HOA regulations. Removal required within 30 days or fines will be assessed at $100 per day. Again, no specific rule cited. Marcus drove to Patricia Hendricks' house that same evening, the letter in hand. Patricia answered the door in tennis whites, her silver bob perfectly styled. Her expression immediately defensive when she saw him. "I'm simply following the rules, Mr. Chun," she'd said, not inviting him inside. "Boats of that size create an eyesore and impact everyone's property values." Marcus explained calmly that he found no such rule in the bylaws and asked her to show him the specific regulation. Patricia's lips thinned. The board has the authority to determine what constitutes a nuisance. If you don't like it, you can take it up at the next meeting. She closed the door before he could respond. Marcus attended the next HOA meeting, held in the community clubhouse on a Wednesday evening. 27 homeowners sat in folding chairs while Patricia ran through the agenda with military efficiency. When he raised his hand during new business, Patricia's expression hardened. "Yes, Mr. Chun." He stood, introducing himself to the group, explaining his question about the boat regulation. Patricia didn't let him finish. "The board voted on this issue last month. It's settled." Other homeowners exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one spoke up. "Could I see the meeting minutes from that vote?" Marcus asked. "And the specific bylaw language?" Patricia shuffled papers. "The minutes are still being finalized." But the vote was unanimous among attending board members. Marcus noticed she didn't answer the second part. He sat down, watching Patricia steamroll through the rest of the meeting, noting how she controlled every discussion, how the other 3 board members, Jim Talbot, Grace Morrison, and David Rue barely spoke except to agree with her motions. The breaking point came 4 months after Marcus had moved in. He returned from a weekend trip to visit his daughter in Atlanta to find his dock gate padlocked with a chain he didn't recognize, and a new letter taped to his steering wheel. Patricia must have entered his property to place it there. Final notice: your vessel is scheduled for removal by Marine Towing Services on December 18th at 8 a.m. All costs will be added to your HOA account and a lien will be filed against your property for non-payment. This action is authorized under HOA Bylaw Section 7.3, B regarding nuisance abatement. Marcus read the letter 3 times, his hand shaking with rage. Section 7.3 dealt with noise complaints and unsecured trash containers. It said nothing about boats. Patricia hadn't just threatened him, she'd fabricated a legal justification and trespassed on his property to deliver it. She'd also scheduled the towing for 3 days before Christmas, the anniversary of Sarah's passing. Something crystallized in Marcus that moment, standing on the dock where he'd scattered Sarah's ashes. He was done asking, done being reasonable, done pretending Patricia's behavior was anything other than targeted harassment. Backed by manufactured authority, Marcus spent the next 2 weeks doing what he did best: research. He pulled the original property deeds from the county recorder's office. He requested federal navigation charts from the Army Corps of Engineers. He reviewed every HOA meeting minute from the past 5 years. He documented Patricia's own property with time-stamped photographs. And he made several phone calls to colleagues who specialized in HOA law and federal waterway regulations. By December 17th, the night before the scheduled towing, Marcus had built a case that would dismantle Patricia's authority piece by piece. He also had the phone number for Marine Towing Services, and he'd already spoken with their dispatcher about the fraudulent work order. Everything was ready. Tomorrow morning, when Patricia arrived to watch his boat being towed away, She'd get an education in maritime law she'd never forget. December 18th arrived cold and clear, with frost coating the dock planks and morning mist rising off the channel. Marcus stood on his back deck at 7:30, coffee in hand, watching the empty waterway. He positioned a folding chair at the perfect angle to observe both his dock and the street access point where the tow truck would need to enter. His phone sat on the deck railing, already recording video. At 7:55, Patricia's white Mercedes SUV pulled up to the channel access gate, followed by a marine towing services truck. Marcus smiled. Right on time, he watched Patricia climb out, dressed in pressed khakis and a navy blazer, carrying a leather portfolio that probably contained her official paperwork. The tow truck driver, a weathered man in his 50s with a marine towing polo shirt, stood beside his truck looking confused as Patricia gestured toward the channel. Marcus waited. He wanted her fully committed before he made his move. At 8:05, when the driver began unloading equipment, Marcus descended his deck stairs and walked calmly toward them. Patricia saw him coming and straightened, clutching her portfolio like a shield. "Mr. Chun," she said loudly, voice carrying across the morning air. "You were notified. Please don't interfere with official HOA business." Marcus stopped 10 feet away, his expression neutral. "Actually, Patricia, we need to talk about what's official and what's not." He turned to the tow truck driver. "Sir, did Mrs. Hendricks tell you who authorized this work order?" The driver glanced between them. "She said she's the HOA president and has the authority to remove nuisance vessels from HOA property." Marcus nodded slowly. "And did she happen to mention that this channel isn't HOA property?" Patricia's face flushed. "That's absurd. This is a private community waterway." Marcus pulled out his phone, opening a saved PDF. "Actually, it's not. This is a federally regulated navigable waterway under Army Corps of Engineers jurisdiction. The HOA owns the land up to the bulkhead. The water itself is federal." He turned the phone toward the driver, showing him the official navigation chart with the channel clearly marked as federal waters. Patricia's voice rose. "That's irrelevant. The boat is docked at an HOA-owned dock," which means Marcus interrupted, his attorney voice emerging for the first time, calm but commanding. "Which means you have no authority to remove it without a court order. But let's talk about authority, Patricia. Let's talk about what you actually know about me." He pulled out a slim leather folder from his jacket. "Patricia Ann Hendricks, age 59, 342 Osprey Lane, married to Robert Hendricks, Regional Sales Director for Palmetto Medical Supply. You've been HOA president for 6 years. You chair the Architectural Review Committee. You have significant influence over what gets approved in this community." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "If you're trying to intimidate me," Marcus continued smoothly, "I'm a maritime attorney, Patricia. Have been for 23 years. My firm, Brennan and Associates, handles everything from commercial shipping disputes to coastal property litigation. When you started sending me threatening letters 4 months ago, I did what I always do. I researched. Would you like to know what I found?" He opened the folder, pulling out documents. "First, I pulled the original land survey from 1987 when this community was developed. The channel was explicitly excluded from HOA property. It's platted as a federal navigation easement." He showed her the highlighted survey map. "Second, I contacted the Army Corps of Engineers about commercial navigation permits for this waterway. Turns out my firm holds one of only 3 permits for this entire channel. We use it for client vessel inspections and maritime surveys. Has for 12 years. Patricia's face had gone pale. "Third, I reviewed every HOA meeting minute from your tenure as president. You cited Section 7.3 4 times in the past 3 years, every time incorrectly, and every time to threaten homeowners who disagree with you." Marcus pulled out another document. "Jim Talbot in 2022 wanted to install solar panels. You cited 7.3, B claiming it was a noise nuisance. Solar panels don't make noise, Patricia." He pulled out another. Grace Morrison wanted to paint her shutters sage green in 2023. You cited 7.3. B again. Calling it a visual nuisance, even though the architectural guidelines explicitly allow any shade of green. Another document. David Wu wanted to replace his fence with wrought iron. You cited, let me guess, 7.3B? Patricia said nothing, her knuckles white around her portfolio. You've been weaponizing a bylaw about trash and noise to control homeowners through intimidation. And when I showed up with an actual legal question, you couldn't answer it because there is no rule about boats. The tow truck driver had quietly begun loading his equipment back onto his truck. Marcus turned to him. Sir, I apologize for wasting your time. Mrs. Hendricks issued this work order without legal authority. I'm happy to pay your travel fee for coming out here. The driver nodded gratefully. Appreciate it? Ma'am, I'm going to need you to sign a cancellation form. Patricia stood frozen, speechless for the first time. Marcus turned back to her, his voice dropping lower. Now, Patricia, here's what's going to happen. You have two options. He held up one finger. Option 1. I file a formal complaint with the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs about your abuse of HOA authority, citing specific violations of the South Carolina HOA Statute Section 2730110, which prohibits selective enforcement and harassment. I simultaneously file a civil suit against you personally, not the HOA. You for trespassing, attempted theft of property, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I have documentation of every letter, every threat, every fabricated rule citation. I have photographs proving you entered my property without permission to place that letter on my windshield. I have meeting minutes showing your pattern of abuse toward other homeowners. And I have 3 colleagues who specialize in HOA litigation who would love to take this case pro bono just for the publicity. He held up a second finger. Option 2. You resign as HOA president within 48 hours, citing personal reasons. You issue a written apology to me and to every other homeowner you've targeted using Section 7.3, admitting you misapplied the bylaws. You agree to never serve on this HOA board again, and you stay away from my property and my boat. In exchange, I don't file any complaints or lawsuits, and this incident stays between us and whoever you choose to tell. Patricia found her voice, shaking with fury. You can't force me to resign. The homeowners elected me. Marcus cut her off. The homeowners elected someone they thought understood the rules. You've been making them up as you go. I've already spoken with Jim, Grace, and David. They're willing to call for a special election if needed. Apparently, you've bullied them for years, too. He paused, letting that sink in. Patricia, you picked the wrong homeowner to harass. I've spent 2 decades fighting corporations with teams of lawyers. You're just one person with a title you've abused. He glanced at his watch. You have 60 seconds to decide. After that, I make the calls. Patricia's portfolio slipped from her hands, papers scattering across the frost-covered ground. Her voice came out as a whisper. This is extortion. Marcus shook his head. No, this is consequence. Extortion would be if I asked for money. I'm offering you a chance to leave with dignity before the legal system gets involved. 50 seconds. Patricia looked at the tow truck driver, who was pointedly staring at his clipboard. She looked at Marcus's calm, professional expression. Finally, she bent down, gathering her scattered papers with trembling hands. Fine, she said, barely audible. I'll resign. Marcus nodded. 48 hours. Written apologies to me, Jim, Grace, and David, and Patricia. She looked up, eyes wet. If I see you on my property again, or if you retaliate in any way, Option 1 goes into effect immediately. Understood? She nodded, turned, and walked back to her Mercedes without another word. Marcus watched her drive away, then handed the tow truck driver $300 bills. For your trouble. The driver pocketed the money gratefully. You know, I've done a lot of HOA calls. Most of them are bullshit like this. Good for you, man. He climbed into his truck and pulled away, leaving Marcus standing alone at the channel access gate as the morning sun burned away the mist. 40-6 hours later. On a Friday evening, Marcus found 4 envelopes in his mailbox. Each contained a single-page letter on Patricia Hendricks' personal stationery. He read his first, standing at his mailbox as neighbors walked dogs and children rode bikes in the fading December light. Dear Mr. Chun, it began, I am writing to formally apologize for my conduct regarding your vessel and private dock. I incorrectly applied HOA Bylaw 7.3 to your situation when no such restriction existed. My actions constituted harassment and trespassing, and I deeply regret the distress I caused you, particularly during this difficult time of year. Effective immediately, I am resigning as HOA president and from the board of directors. I wish you peace in your home and hope you can forgive my overreach. Sincerely, Patricia Ann Hendricks. The letter was typed, but the signature wavered slightly. As if her hand had shaken while signing, Marcus pulled out the other 3 envelopes, already knowing what he'd find. Similar apologies to Jim Talbot about the solar panels, to Grace Morrison about the shutters, and to David Wu about the fence. He walked back to his house, noticing lights on at Jim's place next door. Jim appeared on his front porch moments later, holding up his own envelope. Did you have something to do with this? He called over. Marcus smiled. Let's just say Patricia, and I came to an understanding about the rules. Jim laughed, the sound tearing across the quiet street. About damn time someone stood up to her. She's terrorized this neighborhood for years. He raised his envelope in salute. Thank you, Marcus, seriously. The following Monday, an emergency HOA meeting was called. Marcus attended, along with 43 other homeowners, the largest turnout in community history. Jim Talbot, as the most senior remaining board member, ran the meeting. He read Patricia's resignation letter aloud, then opened the floor for nominations for a new president. The room buzzed with conversation. Sarah Chun, no relation to Marcus but a retired school principal, was nominated and accepted. David Wu was nominated for vice president and also accepted. The votes were unanimous. Before adjourning, Sarah addressed the room. I think we all know this community has had some issues with selective rule enforcement. My first priority is hiring an actual HOA management company to handle the administrative work and ensure we follow our own bylaws. Second priority is reviewing every architectural decision from the past 3 years and allowing anyone who is denied to resubmit. The room erupted in applause. 2 weeks passed. Marcus spent Christmas alone, as he had the previous year, but this time he took the Serenity out for a day sail, something Sarah had always insisted they do on Christmas afternoon. The channel was calm, the winter sun weak but warming. He sailed past the community, past Patricia's house dark and quiet, her Mercedes absent from the driveway, and out into the Ashley River proper. He thought about Sarah's dream of living on the water, about how she would have loved this view, this peace, this hard-won victory over pettiness. When he returned to his dock that evening, he found a plate of cookies on his deck with a note from Jim's wife. Welcome to the neighborhood. The right way this time. 3 months later, Marcus stood in his backyard on a Saturday morning in late March, watching Jim Talbot's solar panels being installed. Grace Morrison had repainted her shutters sage green, and they looked beautiful against her white siding. David Wu's new wrought iron fence gleamed black in the spring sunshine. The community felt different now, lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from everyone's shoulders. The new HOA management company had sent out a comprehensive handbook with actual rules, clearly written, with citations to specific bylaws. No more vague threats. No more manufactured violations. Marcus had seen Patricia only once since December, passing her in the grocery store. She turned down a different aisle without making eye contact. He'd heard through Jim that she and Robert had put their house on the market in February. The listing described it as motivated sellers. Marcus felt neither satisfaction nor guilt about that. He'd given her an option, and she'd made her choice. Sometimes consequences were simply the natural result of actions. Nothing more. On a warm April evening, Marcus hosted his first gathering since Sarah's passing. 20 neighbors showed up, bringing dishes and drinks, filling his deck with conversation and laughter. Jim made a toast to Marcus, who reminded us all that rules are supposed to protect everyone, not just the people who write them. Glasses clinked. Someone asked Marcus how he'd known all that legal information about the channel. He'd smiled and explained his career, his firm's permit, the years he spent navigating exactly these kinds of property disputes. Grace Morrison shook her head in wonder. Patricia really picked the wrong person to bully. David Wu laughed. She picked the only maritime attorney in a waterfront community. What are the odds? Later, after everyone had left, Marcus sat on his dock with a glass of wine, his feet dangling over the edge, the Serenity rocking gently in her slip. The water reflected the last pink traces of sunset, and somewhere across the channel, a Huron called out. He thought about Sarah, about patience and justice, about the difference between power and authority. Patricia had confused the two, wielding a title like a weapon without understanding the limits of her actual authority. Marcus had understood those limits perfectly, had built a career around understanding them, and had used that knowledge not for revenge, but for restoration, for the right to exist peacefully in the home he bought to honor his wife's memory, for the right to keep the boat that held the last pieces of their shared dreams, for the right to be left alone by someone who'd mistaken a position for permission to harm. As darkness settled over the channel, Marcus raised his glass toward the water. "We made it, Sarah," he said quietly. "We're home." And for the first time since she'd been gone, that word felt completely true. Not because he won, not because Patricia had lost, but because he'd fought for the peace they both dreamed of and earned the right to keep it. Justice, he'd learned, wasn't always swift or dramatic. Sometimes it was simply the quiet satisfaction of knowing you'd done everything right, even when doing it the hard way. Especially then, across the country in Boulder, Colorado, 43-year-old former IRS senior investigator Jennifer Park was organizing her garage when her neighbor, entitled businessman Craig Westmore, marched onto her driveway demanding she remove her trash pile of moving boxes within 24 hours or he'd report her to code enforcement for violating neighborhood standards. Craig didn't know that Jennifer wasn't just any new neighbor. She was the former head of the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, who'd spent 16 years tracking financial fraud and who'd noticed, during her friendly conversations with other neighbors, that Craig's home business had some very interesting irregularities with his property tax assessments. When he threatened to call the city, Jennifer smiled, the same calm smile that once preceded federal audits, and replied, "Please do. I'd love to show them my documentation of your unpermitted commercial operation. Now, about you trespassing on my property to deliver threats. But that's a story for another time."